If FRQs feel confusing or overwhelming right now, that doesn't mean you're bad at AP Biology. It just means you're not fluent at the FRQ skill set yet. I'm Ms. Parrott, and in today's video, we're going to be breaking down all 6 types of free response questions that you'll see on the AP Bio exam. And by the end, you'll be able to recognize patterns, start anticipating what you're going to see and understand what they're really asking, and get to that fluent step by step. Also, if you stick with me to the end, I've got some practice tips on how you can practice FRQs outside of just doing them on test day in your class. So let's get into it. There are 6 specific question types on the AP Bio exam. They all test the same core skills, just in different formats. So the goal of this video is to help increase your familiarity with the setup so you'll know what's happening going in. That will reduce your stress and anxiety so that you can walk in strategically, confident, and earn more points on the AP Bio exam. So, all of the FRQs, all 6, are trying to assess your ability to analyze data, apply biological concepts, and make predictions. Don't forget, you're also going to have to justify with evidence. So being able to say why you think what you think with the data that's given. So they all are going to be presenting you with some data or information. They're going to require that you think or process that information before you give an answer. Now let's break them down step by step. So the FRQ section comes out just blazing with FRQ number 1. FRQ 1 and 2 are both 9 points each. These are your long FRQs. It's going to ask you to analyze data and an experiment. Just so you know, the whole first page is just going to be describing the experiment, and they're going to give you way more detail than you need. It's often also an unfamiliar scenario. So they're going to start out and you just might freak out. And that's okay. No, anticipate that, right? If we're anticipating it and we see it, we know what's going to happen, then we're not going to get stressed out that we're seeing something we've never seen before. Because it's not asking you about the biology of that experiment. It wants you to be able to describe trends in data, identify different scientific methods or parts of the data. It's going to ask you to analyze and calculate. So there's some nice points in the math. And then you're going to have to predict what's going to happen next and justify your answer with data from the experiment. So the key here is to start with looking at your task verbs, then go into the reading, because otherwise the reading is going to overwhelm you, freak you out, and put you in a mindset of, I have no idea what's going on, instead of a mindset of, hey, this is just about experimental design, data analysis, I can do this. So go in with that mindset and don't let question 1 freak you out. All right, question 2, also a long one. Again, it's worth 9 points because in this one, it's very similar to number 1, usually a little less written description, usually not a lot less, but a little less written description, and usually some data tables after some calculations and things like that. The key here is you've got to create a graph, and that's going to be like 3 or 4 points of this 9 points. So once you create the graph from the data, then you're going to be asked to analyze that data. Sometimes you may be asked to state a null hypothesis and then predict what will happen next and justify it with evidence from the data in the graph that you just made. Now, it's just going to say make a graph. It may not tell you everything to include. So be sure that in your graph, that you label your axes with the dependent variable, or the thing that you're actually like measuring, on the y-axis, with the independent variable on the x-axis. So that's like your control and your experiment, or whatever your groups are. And then you want to be sure that you're choosing the correct type of graph, whether it's a line graph or a bar graph. They will not ask you to make a pie chart, so don't worry about that. The type is going to depend on what the experiment is comparing. So now sometimes they'll tell you make a bar graph or make a line graph, and sometimes it won't. So you're going to need to practice that as well. Don't forget on your axes when you're labeling them to include units. So like if you're measuring height, be sure that you've got centimeters or whatever unit they describe in the question on your axis. All right, now we're getting into the shorter FRQs. These FRQs are worth 4 points each. And so FRQ 3 is always about a scientific investigation. Often one that you did that was like one of the 13 that AP Bio teachers are supposed to get through, as many of them as possible. And this one's gonna be asking you about experimental design. So what's my control group? What's the experimental group? What are the dependent and the independent variables? What do I need to do to control, right? So your variables and procedures, and it may ask you to state a null hypothesis. Here, the main goal, again, it could be a scientific investigation you've never heard of before, but if you think like a scientist and think back to your scientific methods, you will be fine. FRQ number 4, this is actually one of my favorite ones. It's the conceptual analysis. And this is where your biological understanding really gets to shine. So in this, you're gonna have to explain biology and predict how a system changes if something goes wrong in the biology. And you're going to be doing that at different levels. So often it'll be something like a virus comes in and messes up, makes this one plant sick, or like causes it to lose its chlorophyll, right? So it'll ask you like, how is that going to impact the cell on the cell, or the plant on the cellular level? And then on the what effect is that going to have on the organism, on the population, and then on the whole ecosystem? So it'll ask you it's like, think of it like dominoes falling. If this one thing goes wrong, and it's often like a mutation in a protein that has a specific job in some other process in the ecosystem. So like, a mutation in ATP synthase, right? And then you need ATP synthase to make ATP. And without ATP, none of your cell processes can go. And if your cell processes can't go and your enzymes can't work, then your thing is gonna die. And if your organism dies, how is that gonna affect the population? Well, it depends on, is the thing that's killing it like a virus that is like spreadable or not? And then like, how could that affect the ecosystem? Or over time, like, is this something that is heritable and can be passed down, and then we're going to result in a shift in allele frequency over time? So are we going to see a whole evolutionary shift because of whatever the weird little thing? But see what I'm saying? It's like domino. What's the domino effect of this one thing going wrong? So you could think through each kind of like main idea in a unit. And if something goes wrong with photosynthesis, how is that what's the domino effect? If something goes wrong with osmosis, how is that gonna affect the whole line, right? So consider that as you practice question 4. Now, question 5, I have a whole video on how to answer question 5. Check it out. So in this one, it's going to give you a model or visual representation. Now, sometimes this could be something like a Phylogenetic tree, a cladogram. It could be a nitrogen cycle or a carbon cycle, a food chain, a food web. It could be something that you've never even, like, oh, love a feedback loop, a feedback mechanism. Right, where like enzyme B makes product 1 and enzyme C makes product 2, and what happens if enzyme B gets a mutation, right? You have to be able to use the visual model to help you answer. On this one, you've got to interpret the diagram and explain relationships between different parts. Precision in your explanation is where you're going to get points. And then the last FRQ is data analysis. Now, in this, you're actually going to have to, it'll give you some data, right? And it'll ask you to describe data twice, but it'll ask you to describe different sets of data. But that's nice because all you have to do is, what do you see? What are the data doing? But don't just say, it increases. I mean, yeah, but be more precise. It increases from generation 1 through 7. And then it decreases at a slower rate from generation 8 through 20. Right, whatever, but like be precise in what you're saying. The more precision, the more likely you are to earn the points. It'll also ask you to evaluate a hypothesis. What does evaluate the hypothesis mean? It just means, is the hypothesis supported or rejected by the data? And then you want to justify that evaluation with the data itself. And then it'll ask you to explain the biological connection, what is causing these trends in the data. And that's where you take your biological knowledge and add it to the situation. Now, how do we practice? That is the most important thing, because it's one thing to know what to expect, but it's another thing entirely to be able to do it and do it quickly, confidently, and accurately under time pressure. That's what fluency is. So here are my tips for how to practice for the FRQ section. First, go to the College Board website. They have released years and years of FRQs on there, and they all follow these six styles. So if you want to practice question 1, go to last year, go to the year before, go to the one before, and they're all gonna follow that same style. You want to practice one type at a time because they're each going to be a little bit different. Each of these on the College Board also come with scoring guidelines. So you want to look at one and try it yourself, handwriting, because that's what you're going to have to do on the real exam. And then use the scoring guidelines to check your answers, just like the readers will be doing in June after you've taken the test. When you're practicing writing, don't just think through it. Actually write and complete sentences, because like I said in a previous video, it's a lot of writing. And so you actually have to kind of work up your hand muscle stamina for 90 minutes of writing. So this is the perfect opportunity to practice that. You want to remember to support all your answers with specific evidence. Anytime it says justify or explain, use evidence. And then once you've gotten some practice just in knowing what to expect and how to organize your answers, then you can time yourself. And then you want to work on building speed over time. So your long FRQs, the first 2, that you want to give yourself 20 to 25 minutes to answer as much as you can on one of those. And then move on. I would say, especially on question 2, when you have to make a graph, you want to practice making graphs by hand before the day of the exam. Doing it quickly. It doesn't have to be super perfect, but it also can't be a hot mess. So that's why you got to practice timing yourself. The short FRQs, those last 4, you want to be able to answer in 8 to 12 minutes. So if there's a B, C, D on all of them, then that means you give yourself 2 to 3 minutes per question. And you can do it, you just have to practice. Remember, AP style practice is what takes us from I can do this in class when I have plenty of time or for homework to I can do it fluently and earn as many points as I can on the AP exam. I hope this video helped you master all 6 FRQs and give you the information you need to be successful. If it was helpful, please do give it a like. Subscribe to my channel, click on the notification bell so you get all my AP Bio Exam Skills Series videos. Leave a comment, a question, or an emoji that you have about the FRQ section down below. I'll be sure to get back to you. And teachers, check out my resources on TPT at Know and Grow with Gnomes. Keep learning, keep growing, and we'll see you next time.